Johnny Carson was interviewing an 8-year-old boy from the Los Angeles Children's Choir about their upcoming Christmas concert, when the child suddenly went off script and asked a question that made 300 audience members stop breathing. The boy stood there in his little red bow tie, looking up at Johnny with eyes that had seen too much for his age, and said words that would haunt everyone in that studio forever. What happened next caused Johnny Carson to walk away from his desk, the cameras to stop rolling on director's orders, and The Tonight Show to experience the only moment in its history deemed too powerful to fully broadcast. December 14, 1976. The Tonight Show's holiday special taping was running beautifully, with the Los Angeles Children's Choir having just finished a stunning rendition of Silent Night that left the audience misty-eyed. Johnny had invited them as part of his annual Christmas tradition, featuring local youth groups to bring what he called actual joy instead of Hollywood glitter to the season. The 32 children, ages 6 to 12, stood in perfect formation, wearing matching white shirts with red bow ties, looking like a Christmas card come to life. Johnny had been interviewing different choir members, getting charming responses about Santa wishes and favorite carols. The audience was eating it up. Nothing played better than innocent children at Christmas. He'd just finished talking to a girl who'd explained her scientific theory about how reindeer fly, when the choir director gently pushed forward a small boy from the back row, 8 years old, maybe 8 and a half, with sandy brown hair that wouldn't stay combed and a bow tie slightly askew, despite obvious attempts to straighten it. "And what's your name?" Johnny asked, bending down slightly with his practiced avuncular warmth. "Tommy," the boy said quietly into the microphone. "Tommy Mitchell." "Well, Tommy Mitchell, how long have you been singing with the choir?" "6 months," Tommy replied, his voice barely above a whisper. The audience leaned forward. There was something about this child that felt different. While the other children had been bouncing with excitement, Tommy stood perfectly still, his hands clasped in front of him like he'd been taught to stand in court. The show continued with its planned rhythm. Johnny asked Tommy about his favorite Christmas song, and the boy said, "I'll be home for Christmas," with such weight that a few audience members exchanged glances. Johnny, professional as always, kept the conversation light, asking about school and friends. Well, Tommy answered politely but briefly, his eyes never quite meeting Johnny's, instead focusing somewhere past the cameras as if looking for someone who wasn't there. "Are you excited for Christmas, Tommy?" Johnny asked, the standard question he'd posed to all the children. Tommy paused, then said quietly, "I guess so." The audience chuckled softly, thinking it was childish shyness. They didn't yet understand what they were really witnessing. "Tommy," Johnny said, preparing to move on to the next child, "what would you like Santa to bring you this year?" Tommy looked down at his shoes, then back up at Johnny. "I don't need presents." "Oh, come on," Johnny smiled, trying to coax out some childhood enthusiasm. "Every kid wants something for Christmas. A bike? A train set?" "I just want one thing," Tommy said, his voice still quiet, but somehow carrying through the entire studio. "What's that?" Johnny asked, genuinely curious now. Tommy shifted his weight from foot to foot, that nervous movement every foster child learns when they're about to say something that might get them in trouble. The choir director started to move forward, sensing something unprogrammed happening, but Tommy spoke before she could intervene. "I want a dad." The studio grew noticeably quieter. Johnny's smile softened. This wasn't unusual. Divorced parents were common, even in 1976. "Well, Tommy, that's something that—" "My social worker says I've had 11 foster homes," Tommy interrupted, the words tumbling out now like a dam breaking. "She says I'm hard to place because I'm older. Most people want babies, but I don't need much. I'm quiet. I do my homework. I don't eat a lot." The audience was completely still now. The choir director reached for Tommy's shoulder, but Johnny subtly waved her off. Something was happening here that needed to happen. "Tommy," Johnny said gently, "I'm sure you're a wonderful boy. Any family would be lucky." "Would you want me?" Tommy asked suddenly, looking directly at Johnny for the first time. The question hung in the air like a physical thing. Johnny blinked, taken aback. "What do you mean, Tommy?" "I watch you every night at the group home," Tommy said, words coming faster now, desperate. "You're funny and nice, and you never yell. You seem like a good dad. Mrs. Patterson at the home says you have sons, so you know how to be a dad already." The cameras caught Johnny Carson's face cycling through expressions: surprise, confusion, something deeper. Ed McMahon had gone completely rigid at his desk. Doc Severinsen had set down his trumpet. The entire studio seemed to be holding its breath. "You want me to be your dad?" Johnny repeated, his voice barely steady. The words seemed to echo through the studio. Tommy nodded earnestly. "I wrote you a letter, but they said you don't read them all. So when they said the choir was coming here, I practiced really hard so I could meet you." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a carefully folded piece of paper, worn from being handled. "I wrote down why you should pick me." The audience was starting to cry. Several people had their hands over their mouths. The choir director looked mortified, whispering, "Tommy, no." But the boy continued. "I'm 8, so I can already tie my shoes and make my own breakfast," Tommy read from his paper, his small voice filling the silent studio. "I'm good at math and I can help with chores. I don't have nightmares much anymore, and when I do, I don't scream. I know all your jokes so we could laugh together." Johnny's hands were visibly trembling. Ed McMahon had turned away from the cameras entirely. The NBC pages were frozen, unsure whether to intervene. Fred de Cordova was in the booth making frantic cut gestures, but the camera operators kept rolling. Tommy looked up from his paper. "The other kids at the home say I'm stupid for asking, but Mrs. Patterson says you should always try for what you want most. And what I want most is a dad, a real one who stays." "Tommy," Johnny started, then stopped. His voice cracked. He tried again. "Tommy, I know you're really busy," Tommy rushed on, "and important, and you probably have enough kids. But maybe you could just think about it. I could trial it, like when foster parents take you for weekends first. If I'm too much trouble, you could send me back. I'm used to that." Those last 4 words, "I'm used to that," delivered in a matter-of-fact tone by an 8-year-old, shattered something in the studio. A woman in the front row was openly sobbing. Several of the other choir children were crying. The choir director had given up trying to intervene and stood with tears streaming down her face. Johnny Carson looked at this little boy who'd planned this moment, who'd practiced singing for months just to stand here and ask a stranger to love him. Johnny Carson dropped to one knee in front of Tommy, bringing himself to the boy's eye level. The cameras captured tears streaming down his face, something America had never seen before. He took both of Tommy's small hands in his. "Tommy," Johnny said, his voice breaking completely, "you are not stupid. You hear me? You are not stupid for wanting a dad. You're brave. You're the bravest person I've ever met on this show." Tommy's composure finally cracked, and he began to cry. "But will you think about it, please?" Johnny pulled the boy into an embrace, and Tommy collapsed against him, this 8-year-old who'd been holding himself together for who knows how long. The microphones picked up Johnny whispering, "Oh, buddy. Oh, Tommy." The entire studio was in chaos. Audience members sobbing, the choir children crying. Ed McMahon had walked off stage entirely. When Johnny pulled back, still holding Tommy's shoulders, he spoke directly to him, forgetting the cameras entirely. "Tommy, I need you to listen to me. You deserve a dad. You deserve a family who sees how special you are. And it's not your fault that you haven't found that yet. But I found you, Tommy said simply. That broke Johnny completely. He stood up abruptly and walked away from the cameras, his back to the audience, hands on his hips, trying to compose himself. The studio was silent, except for crying. When he turned back, his face was devastated. "We're stopping tape," Johnny announced, his voice rough. "Fred, turn off the cameras." "Johnny, we're live." Fred's voice came over the speakers. "Then go to commercial. Go to dead air." "I don't care. Turn off the cameras." Johnny's tone brooked no argument. The red lights on the cameras went dark one by one. But one camera operator, a Vietnam vet named Bill, kept his camera running secretly. What he captured next was never officially broadcast, but became the most bootlegged moment in Tonight Show history. Johnny Carson sitting on the stage floor with Tommy Mitchell in his lap, the boy sobbing into his chest, while Johnny held him and cried, saying over and over, "It's okay, buddy. You're going to be okay. I promise you're going to be okay." When the cameras came back on 10 minutes later, Johnny was back at his desk, his eyes red and swollen. Tommy was sitting in the guest chair, the same chair where Frank Sinatra and John Wayne had sat, his feet not even touching the ground. The choir had been moved to the side of the stage, many of them still wiping their eyes. "Ladies and gentlemen," Johnny said, his voice raw, "I need to tell you something about Tommy Mitchell." In the commercial break, his choir director told me his story. His parents died in a car accident when he was 3. He's been in 11 foster homes in 5 years. Some were bad enough that I can't repeat what happened. But this boy, this incredible boy, still believes someone will want him. Johnny turned to Tommy. "Tommy, I can't be your dad. I wish I could explain why in a way that doesn't hurt, but I can't. But here's what I can do." He looked directly into the camera. "There are 20 million people watching right now. One of you, maybe more, is meant to be Tommy's parent, his real, forever parent." The phone on Johnny's desk rang. Fred de Cordova's voice came through. "Johnny, NBC's switchboard is already jammed. Over 1,000 calls in 2 minutes. Johnny's eyes widened. He turned back to the camera. "If you're serious about adopting Tommy, call NBC. We'll connect you with Los Angeles County Foster Services." He looked at Tommy. "Is that okay, buddy?" Tommy nodded, trying to be brave. "Will you help pick them, my family?" Johnny's voice broke again. "If they let me, yes, I'll help pick them." For the remaining 30 minutes of the show, Johnny didn't do comedy. He sat with Tommy, asking him about school, his favorite books, teaching him card tricks. The cameras caught something extraordinary. Tommy slowly beginning to smile, then laugh, as Johnny made quarters appear from behind his ears. America was watching an 8-year-old boy remember he was still a child. Before the show ended, Johnny made one more announcement. "The Los Angeles foster system tells me there are 4,000 children like Tommy in LA County alone, waiting for families. If Tommy finds his family tonight, don't stop there. There are 3,999 more." By the next morning, NBC had received 47,000 calls about Tommy Mitchell. The Los Angeles Foster Services, overwhelmed, had to establish a special task force just to handle the applications. But Johnny insisted on being involved in the selection process, personally reviewing the final candidates with child psychologists. 3 weeks later, on January 4th, 1977, Tommy was adopted by Jim and Carol Hendricks, a couple from Pasadena who'd been trying to have children for 10 years. Jim was a high school science teacher, Carol a librarian. When asked why they chose Tommy, they said, "We saw a boy brave enough to ask for love on national television. How could we not answer?" The Tommy Mitchell effect transformed American adoption. Within 6 months, adoption inquiries nationwide increased by 400%. Johnny established the Carson Foundation for Foster Children with his own money, never publicizing it during his lifetime. The foundation paid for college tuition for aged-out foster kids and provided emergency funds for foster families. By the time of Johnny's death in 2005, it had quietly helped over 10,000 children. Tommy Mitchell grew up to become Dr. Thomas Hendricks-Mitchell, keeping both his adoptive and original names. He became a pediatric psychiatrist specializing in trauma from early childhood abandonment. In 1992, he appeared on Johnny's final show as a surprise guest. When he walked out, now 24 years old, Johnny broke down completely. Tommy hugged him and said, "You kept your promise. You said I'd be okay. And I am." The moment that was too powerful to broadcast eventually leaked in 2001. The bootleg footage of Johnny holding Tommy on the stage floor, both of them crying, became one of the early internet's most shared videos. It showed something America had never seen. Johnny Carson not as entertainer, but as a human being devastated by a child's pain. In his autobiography, Tommy wrote, "Johnny Carson couldn't be my dad, but he became something else, my proof that kindness existed. He taught 20 million people that foster kids weren't broken, just waiting. I wasn't the only one who found a family that night. Hundreds of children did, because one man stopped a comedy show to let a boy ask for love.